Terence's life had radiated the love of Christ. Terence came to Hong Kong, a foreign land where he had no root. He was once a stranger and foreigner to this tiny city. But Terence has shown his courage and commitment to serve God's people by sharing with them the gifts he was given. He had led a life of pilgrim that eventually brings him home, a home where he finds eternal joy and eternal peace. I would like to invite you all to sing another hymn. The name of this hymn, He Who Would Valiant Be. It is another favorite hymn of Terence, and this hymn may inform us of his life to be a pilgrim. Terence has no biological children and no direct family tie. He seems a lonely person in the world, but in Hong Kong, where he regarded as home, he has made many connections and many people who loved him take him as a member of their family. And Terence has left many of his footprints in other people's lives. He's a spiritual father, a mentor, an uncle, a brother of many students he taught and cared. He was a dear friend of his colleagues, of his brothers and sisters in Christ. He has been an important member in the family of Ivor and the church. As we gather today to remember and celebrate the life of Terence, many of his former students from Ivor are more than ready to share with us about his life. an extraordinary life that had blessed many. May I now invite Dr. Fong Chi-wen to share with us the eulogy. Dr. Fong is one of the former students of Terence. After Dr. Fong's sharing, we will have Dr. Catherine Ho, former Deputy Headmistress of Yinghua College, and two Terence former students, Mr. Kwan Man Kong and Kwan Kai Chun, to share words of remembrance.
I was exchanging emails with my classmate Ivor in Toronto on what exact day he would come to Hong Kong for the function of Mr. Ivor's 80th birthday, which had been scheduled for April 2014. I was reassured that he would bring as many Toronto boys along as he could. We had hardly finished on the subject when on Monday, the 24th of June, my mailbox was jammed with messages titled, "Sad news, Mr. Ivor died." It could not have been more shocking. Farcical it must have appeared. Barely 2 days had passed, and David and I got to bring the subject of our exchange to the at the end. In Chinese convention, the business scatter code had changed from red to white. Terence was not yet 30 the year he came to Yinghua, having spent the previous 5 years in Africa, initially working as a bank employee and then as a teacher. From his student days at the University College London, he had been actively involved in student affairs, being deservedly bestowed the honor of Honorary Life Member of the Students' Union of UCL for his contribution to student welfare. Answering according to combine his Christian faith and his allegiance to education, he joined the London Missionary Society, which in 1963 posted him to Yinghua College, Hong Kong as a history teacher and to Morrison Hall, University of Hong Kong as warden. By fall of that year, Yinghua had only been 6 months in the new Oxford Road campus. The increased capacity of the school in the new premises called for more classes and more teachers. And as one of the new additions to the staff, Mr. Ivor stood himself out with a fine set of attributes: eloquent, astute, dynamic, and dedicated. Less than a year later, with the announcement of the retirement of the widely respected headmaster, Mr. Herbert Noble, came the confirmation of Mr. Ivor as his successor, something which had never been at odds. Heading Yinghua College, the oldest school in Hong Kong, steeped in history and tradition, proved to be a tall order for the young principal. The challenge was, however, met with downright determination and devotion. One began to notice in the school a careful blend of old and new, a comfortable balance of make and break, and fine-tuning the school curriculum, a renewed emphasis on work outside it. While courses continued to be demanding, activities began to be fascinating. A student could easily and freely choose to fly in the aero club or to fight in the fencing club, to argue in the debating society or to act in the drama, to run cross country or to rock in the pop band. High on his agenda was delivery of a comprehensive education. Talents would be explored for and leaders would be nourished. Senior students were dedicated real duties, probably out of proportion to their abilities, and unaided except for brief advice on turning corners, were left pondering and trying out the options of a possible solution, picking up confidence and experience along the way. He had a heart for a student's future and would do all he could to send them on their chosen course. He would recommend every student as the best the school has ever produced to institutions requesting references, and would warn the letter of a lost cause on their part if they failed to secure the applicant under reference. It would therefore become inevitable that students were picking up pride and self-belief as much as the school was picking up momentum and dynamism. How the Omega Rose Bowl was won has long gone down in the Yinghua folklore. The crouching dragon in Yinghua had completed its recuperation and was ready for the skies. Such was his bequest when Mr. ILES had toiled out his contract after 8 years at the helm. The collective signature of hundreds of old boys far and wide would not change the reality of the departure of their beloved master, to whom they claimed owing much of their success. Regardless, he has since remained in close contact with many of them. But their loss would be others' gain. The beneficiary of Mr. ILES' teachership would, by 1973, change the students of St. Catherine's School for Girls, which Mr. ILES joined as an English teacher and head of English panel, position he held for the next 7 years. Stories then began to emerge of how great a teacher friend he was making to the students and staff of St. Catherine's, who are here today to deliver the testimonial in their own persons. At the same time he was teaching, he was also a welcome television newscaster, a job his impressive articulacy was completely worthy of. After retirement, Mr. ILES would spend the latter part of his life in the Philippines. On this occasional visits to Hong Kong, he would make it a routine to see me, supposedly for a medical checkup, but without exception, every consultation would end up in talks quite far removed from the intended purpose. But without exception, he would request a list of old boys for whom he was going to pray. Mr. ILES has now passed on. It has to be God's decision to send angels. Skimming the shock, the unexpectedness and the affection and the like, I sincerely believe this is a good end to a good man. He has left free of the torment of a protracted disease cause and of the anxiety of deteriorating health. Even by today's standards, he has enjoyed reasonable longevity. For a man gone at 79, mourning should be brief, because for a child of God, eternal life has been promised. In this world, Mr. ILES will be fondly remembered by members of the Yinghua family, past and present, by students and colleagues at St. Catherine's School, and by all who are going to benefit from his legacy in the Terence ILES Scholarship. He will rest in peace.
Dear friends of Mr. ILES, dear alumni of Yinghua, this evening we have gathered together to reminisce, reflect, and contemplate the life and the achievements of a prominent principal, a great teacher, a caring mentor, a loyal friend, and a God's faithful servant. I deem it my privilege and my honor to be in association with the Yinghua family during the prime period of its development, with Mr. ILES at its helm. Though my association with Mr. ILES was brief, I honestly feel that his impact on Yinghua had straddled across a few centuries, far beyond his 8 years tour of service as principal. And now, I'd like to share with you a few salient episodes as my remembrance of Mr. ILES. In fact, Mr. ILES was my first ever full-time boss. My first encounter with Mr. ILES took place on a very cold December morning. I was told by the supervisor, the then supervisor of Ivor College, to go and have a chat with the principal. That morning, I was ushered into the principal's office by the Commander-in-Chief of the Yinghua office, the late Mr. Man Wai. With a knock on the door, I found myself seated in front of a big gentleman. He was buried in heaps and piles of notes, textbooks, and files. He looked up, he stood up, he shook my hands. And with a clear, loud, heavy nasal tone, and of course a British accent, he said, "Miss Ho, do you take a seat? Let's have a chat." The chat was supposed to be an interview as a full-time applicant for the post of English and music teacher. Instead of a 30 minutes interview, it lasted for 3 hours. And at the end of the chat, Mr. ILES thrusted a shopping list at me, and he added, "Miss Ho, please train up the house choir. Please train up the college choir. Please train up the choral speaking groups. Please win more prizes for the school. Enhance the school image. And do more for the school. And I won't take no for an answer." Being afraid of not getting my job, I took everything he had said on board. I thought I did the right thing. And I thought to myself after I left his office, I said, wow, how direct this gentleman had been. So in the first instance, Mr. ILES impressed me as a man who didn't beat around the bush. He came direct to the point, without any circumlocution, and he expected the same direct and honest answers. And most importantly, he got the name Yinghua on his lips all the time. And it was on this basis of mode of operation that we managed to collaborate and cooperate to bring the school to new heights in the subsequent few years. I'm sure that our colleagues who are with us this evening, like Mr. So, Mr. Ko, Ms. Helen Lee, Ms. Rosemary Lee, Mr. Chiu Sing Woon, who are present, will share the same opinion on Mr. ILES as I do. Secondly, I saw Mr. ILES as a giant of his times in various senses of the word. He was a man with a big heart, a great mind, far-fetched vision, tremendous vigor and stride, a photographic memory, and unsurmountable courage. I trust that you will hear more about his caring attitude and what he had done to our alumni later, when a few of our alumni will share their moving stories and how they had benefited from the teaching and the caring of Mr. ILES. Mr. ILES once said to me, "The more you give away, the more will come back to you. The more you give away, the more will come back to you." Indeed, what Mr. ILES had said had been evidenced by the many, many grateful acts shown to him by the alumni after his retirement. Truly, Mr. ILES had thousands and thousands of children that he had taken under his wings. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening I am humbled by the presence of so many faithful friends of Mr. ILES and so many distinguished alumni who had followed Mr. ILES' footsteps by giving nothing but the best to the community. And now, as the candle finally burns out, I pledge that we all cherish the heat and the light that once was emitted by this candle, in the way that Mr. ILES had exerted his influence and impact on Yinghua. And if you have a little time, free time, in your quietness, please try to hum the two favorite hymns that Mr. ILES had liked. "We Shall Overcome" and "Because He Lives." Thank you.